or device over others, especially if there's a possible conflict of interest. And what I've learned over time is that the big tech companies, Google, Apple, Microsoft, for example, they will often come to schools and offer to share their technology with a school or with teachers in exchange for the teachers using it in their classrooms, and in exchange for providing benefits to teachers, such as free use of the equipment, perhaps free invitation to conference, in order to promote the technology. And again, that could be a conflict of interest if we convey to students that, well, you can only learn if you use this brand of computer, like this iPad or this iPhone or this Mac computer, because that could provide a conflict of interest, because of course there are other companies that provide technology as well. And it would be a conflict of interest if teachers convey to their students that they only can use this particular company's tools to do their learning. The third topic is this issue of cyberbullying, and it's the need for teachers to respond to student complaints about cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is part of today's world. Bullying is not a new thing, but cyberbullying takes it to a new level. So one of the responsibilities of teachers is to deal compassionately with students who come forward with complaints that others have been bullying them or harassing them by technology. That means listening to the students, finding out what's happening, providing support to the student as needed. The other thing that teachers can do is support policies that discourage distribution of things like intimate images, one example of the way bullying occurs. But it's also important for teachers to recognize the limits of school and teacher authority in such matters. Teachers are responsible for student well-being in the context of instruction, in the context of a school setting. But teachers are not responsible for the students' well-being and their lives that's remote from schools. So teachers have to be realistic about the scope of teacher authority, school authority, in matters that arise and remain outside the jurisdiction of schools. And the other thing is, teachers have a responsibility to proactively teach students about the risks of living their lives in a digital world, and to teach students how to protect their privacy, themselves and their privacy in such a world. And we know that younger students, they like to post things on the internet, like to post pictures of everything they do, but it's important for teachers to share with students some of those risks and teach them how to protect themselves from being harmed. The fourth topic is teachers' public image and their views as conveyed by social media. Now, because of this fiduciary relationship, teachers are held to a higher standard in society due to that position as being a role model for students. This means that images that are posted by teachers or images that depict teachers in a way that reflects negatively on them may draw scrutiny and public criticism from the public, from parents, and from employers. Also, if teachers post controversial opinions or statements on social media, this too may draw public scrutiny and criticism if these posts cause concern about the effect on students and their position of trust they hold, particularly if there's concern or whether these views are being expressed in classrooms where students are a captive audience, where students have to listen to what the teacher's saying. So those kind of things can cause concern. Both images, pictures of teachers may be engaged in maybe excessive drinking or partying or attending a problematic event or expressing opinions on public issues that may be controversial. But at the same time, it's important to remember that teachers are still members of society, and therefore are entitled to exercise the same democratic rights as other citizens, although subject in some to reasonable limits that may be applied by the government or by their employers. Now in Canada, our Constitution guarantees freedom of expression, but there is a clause that allows for there to be reasonable limits on that expression. I suspect that India has a similar provisions in its constitution as well. So it's important to understand that teachers' public image, public statements will be scrutinized more than, say, non-teachers. But it's also important to understand that teachers do have these same democratic rights. And so it would be unfair for teachers to be treated unreasonably in such respects. All right, I want to finish with six recommended policies or practices. The first one has to do with communications. Teachers need to treat any communication with students or parents or colleagues or others related to employment as if it is public. In other words, even if you send a text or email, assume that it could be public for all to see. A rule of thumb for teachers is that you should not say anything in a text message or an email or a phone call or any other form that you would not say directly to someone or that you would not post on a public bulletin board. So nothing you would say using technology is private. Assume that what you would say could be put on a bulletin board, put out in public. So that would be a rule of thumb as to how to guide what you might say and what you would say using technology. The second thing is teachers must keep firm boundaries between themselves and their students in their communication interactions through any form of technology. I said that teachers have an instructional relationship with their students. It's not a personal relationship. Teachers and students are not meant to be friends, whether friends in the common use of the word or Facebook friends in the social media sense. Teachers can be friendly, compassionate, caring, understanding, but teachers are not friends with students. Students are not your peers. So you need to maintain those boundaries. Now, social media technology often blurs those boundaries, so it's very important to maintain firm boundaries between you, the teacher, and you, the student. Now, various Canadian teacher organizations, have offered guidance to teachers on the use of social media and electronic communication. One notable one is from the Ontario College of Teachers, and if you go to their website at oct.ca and click on their professional advisories, there's a lengthy document that gives advice to teachers on electronic communications and social media use. The next one is about teacher rights. Now, the right of teachers to hold and express controversial views is an important part of modeling democracy to our students. Now, teachers should not be immune from criticism and should be prepared to back up any controversial views with reasoned principled arguments. But unreasonable regulation or scrutiny of teachers is not compatible with promoting a free society and with the values of learning and inquiry. Excuse me. The next one is about educational technology choices. When you are choosing educational technology, those choices must be guided by pedagogical value, and they have to be supported by appropriate professional development for teachers. There's no point, as I said earlier, in providing all kinds of fancy technology tools if there's no training to go with them. It's also important to be careful about conflict of interest. I'm aware, for example, that I think I mentioned earlier that sometimes big companies will give prizes, they'll give recognition to schools for using their technology. That can be very enticing for teachers and schools to want to adopt those in order to get that recognition. So it's very important to have clear conflict of interest policies around the choice of technology products in schools. And the last thing I want to say is to do with cyberbullying. There need to be policies to protect students, teachers from cyberbullying. And they need to be designed to be effective in addressing harm and tailored so that they focus on the connection between members of the school community and the harm, not so much in the time and place of where the harm originated. In other words, the geographical location of where the improper bullying or tweet or something came from is less important than the effect on the school community. So what's important is the policy should be designed so that they're effective in preventing harm or addressing harm, and they need to be based on the harm created by the bullying and the relationship that existed between the bully and those being bullied. So I'll stop there and simply summarize by saying that in the technological age, there are certain things that are foundational. Teachers have this fiduciary responsibility, they have a duty of care, and they also have an instructional relationship. And these things applied in the previous earlier era of teaching, and they apply in today's technological age. All right, thank you very much for this invitation to speak to you today.
Hello, Professor Nasreen.
Yes, yes.
It is on video. Okay.
So, I would like to invite our chairperson for the concluding remarks, I think.
Saeed Siddiqui sir, please invite the students for questions.
Before the concluding remark, I would like to invite our students if they have some questions. Professor Ken Bryan is open for the question answer session. Dear students, please put your questions if you have any query.
Assalamu alaikum. A very good morning to the respected teachers which are here. I have a question, sir. May I?
Yes, sure. Please
Yes,
put
go
your
ahead.
question.
Yes, sir. As sir told about the controversial statements, what can be considered as the controversial statements? We have seen in the many scenarios in case of India or in the ancient times, like Aristotle or many other philosophers gave some statements which were considered as the controversial statements, but actually they were not the controversials. So, in the present scenario, what statements can be the controversials?
Well, that's a good question. And I would say what's controversial to one person may be totally reasonable to another person. I would say that there was a time when people thought that teachers should never say anything that it would cause any type of controversy. Now, you can only say perfectly safe things. But because teachers are educators, and that includes the duty to promote learning, I think controversial could be anything that prompts people to think about things differently. Now, what I will say, the things that could cause a problem would be making statements that are inflammatory or saying things that are unreasonable. So, for example, let's say there's a particular political issue that's current in the country. If the teacher expresses an opinion either for or against, say, a government policy, that by itself doesn't strike me as controversial, in my mind, as long as the opinion is expressed in a way that's based on reason and logic, and backed up by reasonable principle. But if teachers make statements that are unreasonable, that are designed not based on any kind of facts or principles, or are designed to cause harm, particularly if there's statements that would sound harmful to students, that would be where I would draw the line. That would be something for which teachers could be reasonably criticized. But of course, it's easy to say that in sort of abstract terms because people respond to different things differently. Or some topics are draw more attention or touch people more directly. So if somebody expresses an opinion on something that's they hold strong opinions about, that's going to draw more criticism. But I think teachers need to be real. As I said before, think of what you say as if you're doing so publicly on a bulletin board or in front of people. If you could say something reasonably based on logic and principles, that should be fine. If it's not well thought out, if it's not grounded in facts or reason, then it's better not to make that kind of statement.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Anyone next, please?
Next one, please, students, put your questions.
I do see a question in the chat. Do you want me to respond to
Yes,
that?
sir. Sir.
Sultana has some questions.
Okay, the questions head says that talks about a digital divide between rural and urban children, and how do we teachers address that? Okay, that's a good point. Now, of course, teachers have no control over distribution of wealth and technology. What I said was it's important that teachers be careful about becoming salespeople for particular technology. But what I think is most important is how to use technology properly and how to focus on what's foundational. So, for example, learning to read, learning to write, learning to use mathematics. Those are what's most important. And teachers have been teaching those before the invention of the iPad. And so if you're teaching in an area where there are not the proper there aren't the high tech technology, you can still teach those subjects. You simply